Hi everyone, how are you? I hope that you are doing well this week. Thank you very much for all your good work during the past 2 weeks. I could see that's a very good conversations that we had, and we would like to continue that until week 12 later on. But this week, before our meeting, I would like to introduce a little bit about TESOL. TESOL, as you probably are familiar also, stand for Teaching English to Speakers of Other Languages. When we talked about TESOL, at least you can see here there are some keywords that probably you have learned, including teaching young learners, critical analysis, educational psychology, culture and education, pedagogy, educational technology, and then multi-assisted language learning, and also including a language acquisitions that we discussed last week under what the big picture of teaching English to speakers of other languages, or TESOL itself. Before we go further, I want you to learn a little bit what is the objective of our class this week. So at the end of the sessions, you are expected to, number one, explain the significance of teaching English as an international language. And then later on, you are expected to identify some principles as well as strategies in TESOL, probably related to concept syllabus, what is teaching materials, and evaluation in ELT. And then you are also expected to know about learning styles differences and the needs of diverse learners, or several types of learners in this case. And the last one, you are expected to evaluate and also develop effective activities, especially related to listening, speaking, reading, and writing skills. Later on, also in terms of teaching pronunciations, vocabulary, and grammar will become our focus also. What is the keywords of TESOL? Like other or the two previous subjects, we would like to identify some interesting keywords. So for example, like lingua franca. I'm sure that many of you learned that already. Syllabus designs, methodology, curriculum, and evaluation, and several teaching approaches. I'm sure that you probably familiar and also probably use that in your class. Direct method, audiolingual method, total physical response, silent way, suggestopedia, communicative approach, natural approach, and content-based instruction. Okay, and also probably you need to know what's the difference between receptive skill and productive skills. And last, also bottom-up and top-down processing, as well as language input, information gap, and jigsaw activities. For this, actually, I just want you to probably have looked on this interesting video again that I adapted again from TED Talk, and then please have a look. The talk from Roberto Guzman. It's quite funny, I guess. But before you start watching the video, try to think what is the objective of the speaker's talk, and later on try to identify some system or the system that the speaker's name was as teaching English without teaching English. That's unique. Here is the video, and then after that there's the answers of discussions. I try to illustrate a little bit, but I will not discuss that here. I will discuss that later on in our meeting. Now, when we talked about TESOL, TESOL itself, as you know, about English teaching and dedicated to second language learners, or probably foreign language learners like what we have in Indonesia. The fact that TESOL term or the term TESOL refers to two main things. Number one, a professional organizations of TESOL and a training program to teach English speakers of other languages for both in US and also abroad. I used to attend a similar program. This is to get like a TESOL certificate provided by Trinity College, and then later on that was conducted at ILF actually, and I stayed or I spent about 1 month full in order to accomplish the program. Still about TESOL. TESOL also covers several types of English language teaching, as you know, like ESL, EFL, English for specific purposes, English for academic purposes, and English for occupational purposes. To teach English effectively, TESOL come up with an issue or come up with an idea about comprehensive plan, in which involves some programs of curriculum development, and those are includes planning. Yeah, so if you prepare a curriculum, definitely comes from planning, implementation, evaluation, management, and administration. And additionally, that when we talked about curriculum, then the curriculum development should consist of three important aspects. What are they? Syllabus design, methodology, and evaluation. What is syllabus design? Syllabus design is said that it's about an organization of classroom activities. So how will we design the classroom activities? And it come up with several contents in domains of knowledge and behavior. What is it for? All of this content, yeah, is being introduced in order to achieve the learning objective. What do you want the students to achieve by the end of the class, by the end of the week, by the end of the semesters? So that's why a set of sequence in this case is introduced. And again, because in order to, well, I mean, the focus is the objective, then there are some options, yeah, choices being considered in order to differentiate the theoretical rationale, whether we would like to use this or not to use that or the other one. The other issue also related to sequences that may be decided during the classroom activities, not before, but during. Again, this is in order to adjust that with the learner's need. Okay, the second one, when we talked about syllabus design, there are some language teaching syllabi being introduced. Structural syllabus, lexical syllabus, notional or functional syllabus, situational syllabus, task-based syllabus, and content-based syllabus. In terms of ELT materials itself, it refers to anything that can be used to facilitate, to support learning of language. What is it? Linguistic, visual, auditory, or kinesthetic, and all of them can be presented either in print, live performance or display, or DVD or internet at the moment. Language teachers also need to select, to choose, to adapt, and to modify what is the most appropriate materials for teaching. And these adjustments should be aligned to the field of study and the practicality issues of the students inside the class. And materials for language learners, don't forget, at all levels need to provide enough exposure for them, so then they not only, for example, learn that theoretically, but they know how to use that. In terms of ELT media, there are three things that become the focus in English language teaching: audio media, visual media, and audio visual media. You remember in the past we really need to have what's so-called by language lab, but at the moment, just with a computer, single computer or your smartphone, we can learn many things. Okay, this one are some sequences of learning experience and methodologies. Yeah. So which one that you're familiar with? Is that grammar translation method, direct method, audiolingual method, suggestopedia, silent way, total physical response, natural approach, or communicative approach? Okay, we'll try to identify that later. Now, in terms of evaluation and assessment, what is so-called by evaluation? Evaluation is about appraising, evaluating learners and determining the effectiveness of the curriculum that we set before as a whole. And assessment itself is also about a method of seeing how well the learners has performed. The other point about evaluation is also a bit broader and concerns with how well a program, in this case, serve the learners. And informations for teachers and learners also need to be presented in order to improve the overall learning performance. Now let's talk about teaching the language skills, and we'll start that from teaching listening. Okay, teaching listening is also considered as one of the most important out of the four language skills. And the way we teach listening, it could be like top down and bottom up. What is it? Try to have a look, and then we'll discuss that in class. There are some key principles of teaching listening. For example, like expose learners in different ways of processing information. Yeah, like at the moment, again, information, data, and is available in our hands through our smartphone. Also, try to expose learners to different types of text. Yeah, it could be like, for example, like announcement form, for example, or newspapers. It's not always not all newspaper, journal, and several types of texts are available. And teach the language learners a variety of tasks. Yeah, task and text, which is different. Consider text difficulty and authenticity. Yeah, if we remember Krashen's monitor model, students or someone can learn if it's it I plus 1 position. What is it? We'll try to figure that out later on also. Now, teach listening strategies. This is also important. Yeah, it's not always just providing exposure without strategy. So strategy is also important here. The second language skills is about teaching speaking. Okay, so what is the principles of teaching speaking? That we need to be aware with the difference between second language and also foreign language context. Yeah, and then especially in our country, we use English as the foreign language. And then we have to provide, or teachers need to provide students practice with fluency and accuracy. What does it mean by being fluent? Does it, for example, like speak English very fast is considered as fluent? We'll discuss that later. And also, when about teaching speaking, the teachers need to provide opportunities for students to talk. So that's why they call that student talk time, not merely on teacher talk time. Okay? And teachers need to plan speaking tasks that involve negotiations and also negotiations of meaning. What does it mean? For example, in order to get a certain meaning, there should be a kind of conversation between teachers and students to adjust, to find out, oh, this is actually what that expressions mean. Okay, next it's about designing classroom activities that involve guidance and practice in both transactional and interpersonal speaking. The third one is about teaching reading. Okay, once again, this is very short and simple, but later on we'll elaborate that further. Now, there are three common processes in teaching reading. We call that bottom up, top down, and interactive. How are they? I mean that what is that actually? I mean that we need to again have a look and then see that further in our discussions as well as in our class. Okay, what about the principle or key principles of teaching reading? Teachers are required to build a strong vocabulary base. So vocabulary need to be introduced. My dissertation was about vocabulary, and then probably later on I will share that to you in class. Why vocabulary, especially when we talked about academic vocabulary, need to be introduced to the students. Also, teachers need to introduce comprehension monitoring and questioning to the author. Yeah, so well, for example, then that's gonna be about uh, validity and also reliability of data that you can ask. Who is the author of this article? Is that reliable enough or not? Encourage the readers to transform skills into strategies. Yeah, so it's not only about skills. Or you are able to read, yes, but what strategy for you in order to, for example, read a certain books? I mean, that read fast. Yeah, that's important because how many words that you can read in one, for example, in 1 minute, and so on. Okay, the fourth is about teaching writing. What is it about? This is considered the most challenging for language learning. Yeah, and there are some key principles. Is number one is to understand your students' reasons for writing. Why do they need to write? And provide many opportunities for your students to write. Of course, without that, then it's not gonna be good to invite them. Make or provide feedback that helpful and meaningful for the students and clarify and your students also how their writing will be evaluated. Make sure introduce the rubrics for your students. Okay, teaching reading, writing, speaking, and listening already, the four skills. Now let's move to the another three additional, which is teaching pronunciation, and then there's also grammar later on. Yeah, okay, let's see. Okay, pronunciation itself, this is sometimes some of you want to identify. I mean that lots of Indonesian students, lots of our students find difficulties with their pronunciation. Yes, because again, number one is about exposure. The second one is also about the status or the usage of English as a foreign language, not even a second language. So something which is related to the supra-segmental, which is about pronunciation, stress, and so on, probably need to be, well, I mean, it's not become the main attentions for the students. Well, when you teach pronunciations, try to begin with the comprehensions before productions. Let the students to understand, yeah, before they produce them. Set some realistic goals, yeah, because that's gonna be difficult without that, and teach the connection, the relationship between form and function, and then to keep affective considerations firmly in mind. Teaching pronunciation in context. This is also interesting, yeah, and also try to decide what pronunciation items that we need to teach. Next is teaching vocabulary. Okay, there are some key principles need to be introduced or paid attention here is actually about new vocabulary in context. Yeah? So how to teach them and try to focus on the most useful vocab first. In my research, I will identify the most frequently used words and the less frequently used word. Yeah, of course, in spoken, people will use the most frequently used words. And according to Nation, there are about 2,000 head words of most frequently used words that people use in spoken. But when we write down, that will be a little bit different. Yeah, so that's what we call including academic vocabulary and technical vocabulary. Teaching strategies also need to be considered here, especially for vocabulary acquisition, so that learners can add some their vocabulary building. And don't forget to pay attention to repeat, yeah, and give kinds of like a space for learners to review that. Okay, now teaching grammar. Okay, so an important aspect of components here related to the key principles in teaching grammar is integrating both deductive as well as inductive approaches. Try to use tasks to make clear and the relationship between grammatical form and communicative functions. So this is what we call prescriptive in grammatical, and the usage, the descriptive in communication. Also focus on the development of procedural rather than declarative knowledge. So procedural is something which is something that people are aware of. Declarative is something that people become what automatic already. Yeah. So don't let them become what the problems is fossilized. Still remember of how we use he or she, whether we say she or he. Yeah. So this is something that a teacher need to pay attention of. Encourage your learners to use language creatively rather than reproductively. So in order to learn or to use grammar creatively, of course, then we need enough exposure. That's why not only intensive reading, extensive reading will help language learner to become creative here. Well, we are at the end of our sessions, and there are again 3 reflective questions that you need to probably have looked. Number 1, what do you understand about English as a lingua franca? The second one, how are syllabus designs, methodology, and evaluation connected? And the third one, can you identify and explain common ELT methods? Okay, I think that's all for our short discussions or introductions about TESOL. We would like to meet this week, at the end of this week. So I hope that all of you are available and we have a very good discussions later on. Thank you and take care. Bye-bye.